Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had always been different from the other kids in her small Texas town. While her classmates dreamed of Friday night football games and shopping malls, she spent her afternoons reading about military history and watching documentaries about brave soldiers. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who never talked much about his service, would sometimes catch her studying his old medals and photographs. He would just nod quietly, understanding something in his daughter that others missed. When Maria turned 18, she surprised no one by enlisting in the Marines. Her mother cried for 3 days straight, but her father simply handed her his old compass and said, "Stay true to your direction." The words would echo in her mind through every challenge that followed. Boot camp at Paris Island was everything Maria expected, and nothing she could have prepared for. The screaming drill instructors, the endless push-ups, the mental games designed to break down civilians and rebuild them as Marines. Many of her fellow recruits struggled with the physical demands, but Maria discovered she had a gift for endurance. She could run farther, carry more weight, and push through pain better than most of the men in her unit. But it wasn't just physical strength that set Maria apart. During combat training exercises, she showed an unusual ability to stay calm under pressure. When other recruits panicked during simulated attacks, Maria would quietly take charge, organizing her team and finding solutions others missed. Her instructors began to notice her natural leadership qualities. After graduation, Maria was assigned to Camp Pendleton in California. The base was huge, housing thousands of Marines preparing for deployments around the world. She was placed in the logistics unit, responsible for managing supplies and equipment for combat operations. It wasn't the frontline combat role she had originally dreamed of, but Maria threw herself into the work with characteristic determination. The logistics warehouse was a massive building filled with everything from ammunition to medical supplies. Maria's job was to track inventory, coordinate shipments, and ensure that Marines heading into dangerous situations had everything they needed. She worked 12-hour shifts, often staying late to double-check orders or help train newer Marines. Her supervisor, Gunnery Sergeant Williams, was a 20-year veteran who had seen countless young Marines come and go. He was tough but fair, demanding excellence while supporting his team. Williams quickly recognized Maria's potential and began giving her additional responsibilities. Within 6 months, she was managing supply operations for entire battalions. The work was demanding, but Maria loved the feeling of contributing to something bigger than herself. Every box of ammunition she processed, every medical kit she inspected, could mean the difference between life and death for a Marine in combat. She never forgot that responsibility. During her second year at Pendleton, Maria began experiencing occasional dizzy spells. At first, she attributed them to long hours and stress. The military lifestyle was demanding, and fatigue was common among service members. She would drink more water, get extra sleep when possible, and push through the discomfort. The dizzy spells became more frequent, but Maria was reluctant to report them. In military culture, showing weakness could affect career advancement and unit assignments. She had seen other Marines transferred to less important roles after reporting health issues. Maria was determined to prove herself and didn't want anything to derail her goals. Instead, she developed coping strategies. She would grip her desk when dizziness struck during meetings, lean against walls when walking through the warehouse, and always keep snacks nearby in case low blood sugar was the cause. Her fellow Marines occasionally asked if she was okay, but Maria always brushed off their concerns with a joke or quick subject change. As her third year of service began, Maria received news that would change everything. Her unit was being deployed to Afghanistan to support combat operations in Helmand Province. This was exactly the kind of mission she had joined the Marines to support. The deployment would last 8 months, and Maria would be responsible for managing supply operations at a forward operating base. The preparation was intense. Marines attended briefings about the security situation, cultural sensitivity training, and medical preparation sessions. Maria threw herself into the preparations, studying maps of the region and learning about the specific challenges they would face in Afghanistan. During the medical screening process, Maria mentioned her occasional dizzy spells to the base doctor, hoping to get them checked out before deployment. The doctor ordered blood tests and recommended she see a specialist, but the results wouldn't be available for several weeks. With deployment looming, Maria made a decision that would later prove fateful. She convinced the doctor that her symptoms were manageable and related to stress. The doctor, facing pressure to clear Marines for deployment, signed off on her medical clearance with the understanding that Maria would follow up if symptoms worsened. 3 weeks later, Maria boarded a transport plane with 400 other Marines, heading for Afghanistan. As the plane lifted off from California, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed of since childhood. She had no way of knowing that her undisclosed medical condition would soon put her life in danger and lead to one of the most remarkable displays of military honor ever witnessed. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable, with stops for refueling and crew changes. Maria spent the time reviewing supply lists and getting to know the Marines she would be supporting. Many were young, some on their first deployment, others returning for second or third tours. All of them would be counting on her to ensure they had the equipment and supplies needed to complete their mission and return home safely. As the plane descended toward Kandahar airfield, Maria felt the familiar flutter of dizziness but pushed it aside. She had a job to do, Marines to support, and a mission to accomplish. Whatever was causing her symptoms would have to wait until she returned home. It was a decision that would soon test every ounce of courage and determination she possessed. The forward operating base Chapman in Helmand Province was a world away from the comfortable barracks at Camp Pendleton. Surrounded by concrete walls topped with razor wire, the base sat in the middle of a dusty landscape that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The constant threat of rocket attacks and improvised explosive devices meant that every Marine stayed alert at all times. Maria's supply warehouse at Chapman was smaller than what she was used to, but the responsibility was enormous. She managed ammunition, food, water, medical supplies, and equipment for over 800 Marines spread across the base and several smaller outposts. Every morning brought new challenges as supply convoys arrived under armed escort, bringing crucial materials from larger bases. The work schedule in Afghanistan was brutal. Maria typically started her day at 5 in the morning and didn't finish until well after midnight. The extreme heat during the day, often reaching over 120 degrees, made physical labor exhausting. At night, temperatures could drop 40 degrees, creating uncomfortable sleeping conditions in the thin-walled buildings. Despite the harsh conditions, Maria thrived in the environment. The sense of purpose was stronger than anything she had experienced in civilian life, or even during training. Every day brought life or death decisions about supply priorities. When a remote outpost came under attack and needed emergency medical supplies, Maria worked frantically to prepare helicopters for dangerous flights into combat zones. Her fellow Marines quickly recognized her dedication and competence. Corporal Johnson, a young Marine from Ohio who worked in her warehouse, often marveled at Maria's ability to track hundreds of different supply items in her head. Even when computer systems failed during power outages, she could direct operations from memory. The dizzy spells continued in Afghanistan, but Maria became expert at hiding them. The stress of combat operations and irregular sleep schedules provided convenient explanations for any moments of weakness. She developed a network of trusted Marines who would cover for her during particularly difficult episodes, though none of them fully understood the severity of her condition. Private First Class Davis, barely 19 years old and on his first deployment, worked closely with Maria in the warehouse. He noticed that she sometimes gripped tables or walls during conversations, but when he asked about it, Maria would deflect with humor or quickly change the subject. Davis admired her toughness and assumed it was just another example of Marine resilience. 3 months into the deployment, intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in the region. Supply convoys were being targeted more frequently, and several outposts reported attempted attacks. The base commander implemented additional security measures and changed supply schedules to make them less predictable. During this tense period, a critical supply mission arose. Outpost Delta, located 15 miles north of Chapman, had been under siege for 3 days. The Marines there were running low on ammunition and medical supplies. Normal convoy operations were too dangerous due to increased roadside bomb activity, so a helicopter resupply mission was planned for the following morning. Maria worked through the night, preparing the supplies for helicopter transport. Every pound mattered because of weight restrictions, so she had to carefully calculate the exact combination of ammunition, medical supplies, food, and water that would keep the outpost operational. The margin for error was zero. As dawn approached, Maria reviewed her calculations one final time. The supplies were packed and ready, the helicopter crews were briefed, and the mission was set to launch at first light. She had been awake for nearly 20 hours straight, fueled by determination and countless cups of coffee. The helicopter landing zone was a cleared area near the warehouse, surrounded by concrete barriers for protection. As the first helicopter approached, its rotors creating a whirlwind of dust and noise, Maria supervised the loading operation. Marines formed a human chain to quickly move supplies from the warehouse to the aircraft. The loading process required precise coordination. Each Marine had to time their movements perfectly to avoid the spinning rotor blades while moving heavy boxes of ammunition and supplies. Maria stood near the helicopter, directing the operation and ensuring that each item was properly secured for flight. As the second helicopter prepared to land, Maria felt a familiar wave of dizziness. This time, however, it was stronger than anything she had experienced before. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and her vision began to blur around the edges. She gripped the nearest concrete barrier, hoping the sensation would pass quickly. Private Davis noticed her struggle and started to approach, but Maria waved him away. She was determined to complete the mission, no matter what she was feeling. The Marines at Outpost Delta were counting on these supplies, and she would not let them down. The dizziness intensified, and Maria felt her legs becoming unsteady. She tried to focus on the helicopter in front of her, using its familiar outline as an anchor point. Marines continued moving around her, carrying boxes and coordinating the loading operation, unaware of her increasing distress. Suddenly, Maria's world went completely black. Her last conscious thought was concern for the mission and the Marines depending on her. She collapsed onto the dusty ground near the helicopter, her body crumpling like a puppet with severed strings. The first Marine to notice was Corporal Johnson, who was carrying a box of ammunition toward the helicopter. He saw Maria fall and immediately dropped his load, shouting for help. Within seconds, Marines from across the landing zone rushed toward her unconscious form. Private Davis reached her first, dropping to his knees beside her still body. Her breathing was shallow but regular, and her pulse was rapid but strong. Other Marines formed a protective circle around her while Davis checked for obvious injuries from the fall. "Get the medic," Corporal Johnson shouted over the noise of the helicopter, "and tell them to clear a path to the aid station." Hospital Corpsman Rodriguez, the base medic, arrived within minutes with his medical bag and a stretcher team. He quickly assessed Maria's condition while Marines provided space for him to work. Her blood pressure was dangerously low, and her skin was pale and cold to the touch. "We need to get her to the aid station immediately," Rodriguez announced. "This looks like a medical emergency, not just exhaustion." Where? As the stretcher team prepared to move Maria, something remarkable happened. Word of her collapse spread quickly through the base, and Marines began gathering near the landing zone. These were tough, combat-hardened soldiers who had seen their share of injuries and medical emergencies. But something about Maria's situation affected them differently. She had been the backbone of their supply operations for months, working tirelessly to ensure they had everything needed to complete their missions safely. She had stayed up countless nights preparing emergency supplies, had personally delivered critical items to dangerous outposts, and had never once complained about the workload or conditions. As the stretcher team began moving Maria toward the aid station, Marines started falling in behind them. It wasn't organized or planned, but a spontaneous show of respect for a fellow Marine who had given everything for her unit. They walked silently, their weapons secured, following the stretcher through the dusty paths of the base. More Marines joined the procession as word continued to spread. Marines interrupted their duties, stepped out of buildings, and left their posts to join the growing crowd following Maria to the medical facility. The base commander, initially concerned about security, quickly realized what was happening and made the decision to allow it to continue. By the time the stretcher reached the aid station, Over 300 Marines were following in a solemn procession. The sight was unprecedented in the base's history. A spontaneous display of respect and solidarity that transcended rank, unit, and background. Inside the aid station, Hospital Corpsman Rodriguez worked quickly to stabilize Maria's condition. Her blood pressure remained dangerously low, and she showed signs of severe dehydration and exhaustion. The base's senior medical officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, a Navy doctor with extensive combat experience, took over Maria's care. After running several diagnostic tests with the limited equipment available at the forward base, Dr. Mitchell suspected that Maria was suffering from a serious underlying medical condition that had been exacerbated by the stress and physical demands of deployment. Her symptoms suggested a possible heart condition or severe anemia that required immediate attention. Outside the aid station, the gathering of Marines continued to grow. What had started as a few concerned colleagues had become something much larger. Marines from every unit on the base had heard about Maria's collapse and were making their way to the medical facility to show their support. Gunnery Sergeant Williams, Maria's supervisor, arrived at the aid station to find hundreds of Marines standing quietly in formation outside the building. Many had tears in their eyes as they waited for news about their colleague's condition. Williams had served in the Marines for over 20 years and had never witnessed anything quite like this spontaneous outpouring of respect. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander, arrived to assess the situation. As a senior officer with multiple combat deployments, she understood the unique bonds that formed between Marines in dangerous environments. She could see that this gathering was not about protocol or military regulation, but about something deeper and more fundamental to military service. "Sergeant Williams," Colonel Hayes said quietly, "tell me about Staff Sergeant Santos." Williams straightened to attention before responding. "Ma'am, Santos is the finest Marine I've served with in 20 years. She's worked longer hours than anyone on this base, never complained about conditions, and has single-handedly kept our supply operations running smoothly. The Marines trust her with their lives because she's never let them down." As Williams spoke, Dr. Mitchell emerged from the aid station with an update on Maria's condition. She was stable but would need to be evacuated to a larger medical facility for proper diagnosis and treatment. The emergency helicopter evacuation was being arranged and would arrive within the hour. Colonel Hayes made a decision that would become legendary in Marine Corps history. She announced that the entire base would pause operations for a formal send-off ceremony as Maria was evacuated. This was highly unusual for a forward operating base in an active combat zone, but Hayes recognized that this moment transcended normal military procedures. Word of the ceremony spread quickly through radio communications to every unit on the base. Marines who were out on patrol, working in administrative offices, maintaining equipment, and conducting security operations all received the same message: report to the helicopter landing zone for a formal ceremony honoring Staff Sergeant Santos. As Marines gathered at the landing zone, the scale of the response became clear. Over 500 Marines had assembled, representing every unit, rank, and specialty on the base. They formed up in perfect military formation, their uniforms dusty from months of deployment, but their bearing proud and respectful. Among the assembled Marines was Private Davis, who stood with tears streaming down his face as he thought about all the times Maria had helped him adjust to deployment life. Corporal Johnson was there too, remembering how Maria had personally ensured that his squad received extra medical supplies before a dangerous mission that probably saved lives. Sergeant Major Rodriguez, the senior enlisted Marine on the base, took position at the front of the formation. With 30 years of military service, he had participated in countless military ceremonies, but this one felt different. This was not about protocol or tradition, but about honoring a Marine who embodied the best values of military service. The sound of an approaching helicopter grew louder as the medical evacuation aircraft appeared on the horizon. Dr. Mitchell and her medical team prepared to transfer Maria to the helicopter for transport to a larger medical facility in Germany, where she could receive specialized care. As the medical team wheeled Maria's stretcher toward the helicopter, Colonel Hayes called the assembled Marines to attention. 500 voices responded in perfect unison, their boots coming together with a thunderous crack that echoed across the base. "Present arms," Colonel Hayes commanded. In one smooth motion, 500 Marines raised their right hands in a perfect military salute. The sight was breathtaking. Row upon row of Marines standing at rigid attention, their salutes forming geometric patterns across the dusty landscape of the forward operating base. Maria had regained consciousness during the helicopter flight preparation, though she remained weak and confused. As her stretcher was moved toward the aircraft, she saw the massive formation of Marines saluting in her honor. Even in her weakened state, the sight was overwhelming. Tears flowed down Maria's face as she realized what was happening. These Marines, her brothers and sisters in arms, had stopped everything they were doing to honor her service. In a combat zone where every moment mattered, where missions and security could not be compromised, 500 Marines had gathered to show their respect for a colleague who had given everything for her unit. The helicopter medical crew was stunned by the ceremony. The pilot, a veteran of dozens of medical evacuations, had never seen anything like this formal send-off for an injured service member. He made sure to circle the base once before heading to Germany, giving Maria one final view of the Marines who had gathered to honor her. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, the Marines remained at attention until Colonel Hayes gave the command to dismiss. They dispersed quietly, returning to their duties with a renewed sense of purpose and pride in their service. News of the ceremony spread quickly throughout the military community. The story of 500 Marines stopping operations to salute an unconscious colleague captured the imagination of service members around the world. Videos taken by base security cameras were shared widely, showing the remarkable display of military honor and respect. In Germany, Maria underwent extensive medical testing that revealed a serious heart condition that had likely been developing for years. The condition was treatable but would require her to be medically discharged from active duty. The doctors explained that her collapse was inevitable given the stress she had been under, and that she was fortunate to have survived. When Maria learned about the ceremony honoring her evacuation, she was initially embarrassed by the attention. She had simply been doing her job, she insisted, and didn't deserve special recognition. But as she spoke with other service members in the medical facility, she began to understand the deeper meaning of what had happened. The ceremony wasn't just about her individual service, but about the bonds that connect all military personnel. In saluting her, those 500 Marines were honoring every service member who had ever pushed through pain and exhaustion to complete a mission. They were recognizing the sacrifice that military families make every day, and the commitment that drives people to put others before themselves. Maria's story became a symbol of military service at its finest. Military academies began teaching about her example in leadership classes. Recruitment offices shared her story with potential enlistees as an example of the honor and respect that characterizes military service. After her medical discharge, Maria returned to Texas, where she was welcomed as a hero by her hometown community. She struggled initially with the transition to civilian life, missing the sense of purpose and camaraderie that had defined her military service. But she eventually found new ways to serve her community, working with veteran support organizations and speaking to young people about military service. The 500 Marines who participated in that ceremony continued to serve with distinction. Many completed multiple deployments and rose to leadership positions throughout the Marine Corps, but they all carried with them the memory of that dusty morning in Afghanistan, when they had the privilege of honoring a fellow Marine who embodied the best of military service. Years later, when those Marines told their own children about their military service, they would often mention Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, and the day 500 Marines stopped everything to salute her courage. It had been a moment of pure military honor, a reminder of why they had chosen to serve and what truly mattered in life. The story of Maria's collapse and the remarkable ceremony that followed became part of Marine Corps legend, passed down through generations of service members as an example of the bonds that make military service something special. It was a reminder that true strength comes not from never falling down, but from the courage to keep serving even when the mission becomes difficult. In the end, Maria Santos had achieved something that no military decoration could recognize. She had inspired 500 of her fellow Marines to spontaneously honor her service in one of the most remarkable displays of military respect ever witnessed. It was a testament to the power of service, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that unite those who choose to serve their country.